Hi, folks. I have found the ultimate t-shirt. Have you ever worn a wool t-shirt? If not, thank me later. They are nature's miracle. My friends at Unbound Merino sent me these spectacular clothes that are made of 100% ultra-fine premium merino wool, and it's not the itchy kind. They are functional, minimalist in style, and most important, they're sustainable. Naturally odor resistant, antibacterial, and fast drying, you can work out in these clothes, you can go out in them, and in my case, you can even go to space in them, which I actually did. There's no need for a washing machine. I worked out in a merino wool t-shirt for a month without washing them, and it was no problem. Visit www.unboundmerino.com and enter the code down to earth, that's one word, down to earth, for a 15% discount at checkout. Hello and welcome to Down to Earth with Terry Virts, where we talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. Today I have a really cool guest, a friend of mine, Clint Emerson, who's a former Navy SEAL. He's a New York Times best-selling author and an entrepreneur. After a 20-year career in the Navy, he moved on to his next career, which is writing his best-selling book, 100 Deadly Skills. And he also has a highly successful startup company, a business, providing businesses with crisis management consulting. So Clint, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hey Terry, thanks for having me. Good to be here, buddy.
You're on the other side of Texas, I think, right now.
I'm in Dallas. Yeah, that's kind of
Yeah, I'm
the
down here
north
in
side.
Houston. Too bad we're not doing this in person, but it's
Oh,
the it's the Zoom universe.
yeah, it has become a common theme. I think everybody is now kind of addicted to just being stuck at home.
I know it's going to be hard to go back to an office if I ever have to do that again. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that.
Yeah, no
um,
thanks.
hey, I like that background. This is for your new podcast.
Yeah, so I'm still kind of working the lighting, but it's very dramatic in here for a
It
reason, you
is.
know.
Are
But
those
yeah,
skulls?
those are skulls. Yeah, American
It's really
flag and then the
scary.
trident. The trident's lit up there,
Oh
but
yeah.
I'm still playing around with it. Yours looks pretty
I
good too.
I got my thing. This is from the One More Orbit movie. It lights up, but I haven't. I got to plug it in. There's no. I got my IKEA furniture for my background here, and there's no like hole in the back to run the plug out. So
Yeah,
I
and
got to
I
figure out how to do it.
is that one of your picks? The blown up,
The
what are those?
whole.
Four different images?
Yeah, all those
Yeah,
are pictures I took from space, and so yeah, there's some
yeah.
pretty cool stuff. That right there, if you can see it, is a hold down bolt from my space shuttle. So when it's on the launch pad, there are these eight giant, but they probably weigh 20 or 40 pounds each. They're real. This thing is super heavy. And right at liftoff, they explode. There's some explosives in them. And after, I don't know, the next day, some guys go out there and they walk around the launch pad and they find these things and they give the crew, everybody gets half of a bolt. So that's pretty cool.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah.
That's good memento for sure.
Yeah.
I wonder how much that
So
thing cost.
about $1 billion a launch. So
Yeah,
yeah,
so
but there's eight bolts, so
mm,
125 million.
yeah, no kidding. Good
Um,
stuff.
yeah. Well, hey, I want to talk about your Navy career. We met a couple years ago at one of these back when we used to meet in person. And so we've got to know each other over the years, but we've never really talked about your SEAL career.
No, yeah, we haven't,
So
have we?
why'd you join the SEAL? I mean, I thought, I could never do it. I could, if I run a mile, I'm wiped out. But why did you join the SEALs?
I mean, it, gosh, it probably goes back to when I was a kid. There wasn't much about the SEAL community back then. Everything was limited to a library and probably like two books, and one of which had lots of pictures, which is right up my alley. And so it had these guys doing cool stuff, and that was probably the first exposure. And then I was traveling. I grew up over in Saudi, and so on one of our trips coming back to the U.S., I was probably what 10, 11 years old, and we're at the Frankfurt airport. I walk up to the a little restaurant bar that was near our terminal or our gate, and I went up to get a Coke or something. Right, there's this guy standing there at the bar. He looks cool, right? He's got beard, long hair, and he's got these tattoos. And I was kind of an inquisitive, curious kid, and so I'm like, "Hey, what's that tattoo?" He's like, "It's a trident." I'm like, what does that mean? It just means something. He's real, vague, right? I'm like, okay, what is it? What is it? And he's like, it represents the SEAL teams. I'm like, what's a SEAL team? And because the books I'd read, it kind of referred to more of like UDT, underwater demolition teams, which is, our predecessors. And so he goes on to kind of lay it all out there. And I said, well, what do you guys do? And he goes, you do remember when we bombed Libya? I'm like, yeah, I live in Saudi. So, I remember when at the time, Vice President George Bush came to country and kind of said, hey, if things get squirrely, we're going to have some, these C-130s and all Americans will be able to get out of country. And because, mainly because Libya had been threatening to do that, right? Just send rockets into Saudi to kill Americans. Long story short, he kind of tells me this story about how him and his buddies went in and took out the anti-aircraft guns because the B-111s had to come in really low in order to be as accurate as possible. And I was like, wait a minute, you took out what? What do you mean? He goes, we sneak in the middle of the night, we kill everybody, and we blow up the gun. I was like, that's what I want to do when I grow up. So that was the catalyst. I just got lucky running into someone who actually did it for a living. And now that I've grown up, and this is the best part, I was at SEAL Team 3, and then I went to the NSA for a little while, and then I finished my career out at the East Coast at that, secret SEAL command. And interestingly enough, I went to all the historians and asked, did we ever operate or do anything against any aircraft guns prior to bombing Libya? And the answer across the board was no. So this guy was probably 100% fraud, telling me these sexy stories that put me on my path, right?
So, he probably wasn't even a SEAL.
Right. Yeah, he wasn't. I'm pretty sure he wasn't.
He's probably just picking up chicks.
Right. It has turned into one of the most fraudulent jobs out there.
That is an awesome story. Well, that kind of tells our story, because I was the guy that would want to have been in the fighter jet, bombing them while Clint was down there.
It is kind of cool.
Yeah, soaking wet.
Yeah.
So you grow up, you go to high school, and then did you join the Navy and then go into the SEALs, or did you just like talk to did the recruiters send you right to San Diego?
No, during that time frame, you had to basically take the leap of faith, join the Navy, and then they said, hey, when you get to boot camp, you'll be able to take the test to go to BUDS, which is, basic underwater demolition SEAL training.
Right.
I showed up to boot camp, and you take the test, and you just hope, right? It's all a hope. You hope the military does the right thing and does what they say they're going to do, because you and I both know that's not always the case. So could have easily ended up with
checks in the mail. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, you do the test, which is just push-ups, pull-ups, a swim, and a run. And then you get orders to BUDS based on graduating from an A school. And so back then, you couldn't show up straight from boot camp to BUDS. You had to have some kind of a rating or an MOS, because of the high probability that you won't make it. You got to have a job that you can do in the Navy. So they educate you first, then you go to BUDS, make it through BUDS. Now you can go the rest of the way.
It's like a 90% washout rate or something like that?
It's pretty high. Yeah. I think it's definitely 90 plus. My class started with 180 guys, and then there was like 26 originals that graduated.
That made it through. So what do you do? I mean, I remember at the Air Force Academy, guys would talk about it, and it sounded pretty awful. It's in San Diego, though. I mean, you got In-N-Out Burger, you're on the beach,
Yeah, that all sounds real nice.
It's, the palm trees, girls in bikinis. What could go wrong?
Right. Yeah, it's brutal, mainly because they're good at keeping you just wet and sandy, right? And the term being comfortable with uncomfort, or, being comfortable with discomfort. Right. I mean, it really, if there was any place that statement originated out of, it's there. You have to just deal with it. And it's 6 months of just being cold, wet, and sandy.
Wow. Yeah. 6 months. So that's interesting, because at NASA, we had to do this thing called NOLS, National Outdoor Leadership School, where they would send us on these, survival kind of things, but it was only like 2 weeks. But the goal was to make you miserable. Like, the instructors were super happy when it was raining or whatever, because when you're in space, and astronauts are not SEALs, and so we're not used to being uncomfortable, and especially the civilians come from backgrounds that they don't do that stuff. So I did this kayaking trip in Alaska where it literally rained every minute for 2 weeks, except for they had to move us from one island to the next. And on that boat ride, the sun came out, and then when we got there, it started raining again. And we had like 80, had like a hurricane, but that was probably 0.1% of what you guys had to do.
Yeah, I can relate. Yeah, you're right. San Diego, it's nice and sunny and it's beautiful all the time. But
Right.
one thing for certain, the Pacific is cold because it comes from up there in Alaska.
Comes
That
from
water
Alaska. Yeah. Yeah.
cycles down and keeps it at around 55 degrees all year round. So it doesn't matter how great it is outside. As soon as they put you in that ocean and leave you in it, yeah, you're screwed.
Uh,
Yeah.
so what kind of, I mean, it is underwater, right? Underwater demolition. So, or, what kind of underwater stuff did you do?
So water really is their torture chamber, right? In varying forms. So you have the ocean. They do surf torture where they line you up. You've probably seen it in Discovery Channel shows and all the other
Yeah.
places
Yeah.
where you interlock arms. The instructors say, make you march towards the ocean. You get about waist deep in that surf zone, and then they say, okay, sit down. And of course, when you sit down in waist deep water, you're underwater and you're all linked together, elbow to elbow, right?
Right.
And so then they make you lay back so that the surf and the waves are crashing up your nostrils. I mean, it's
Right.
all very thoughtful on how to torture you. So you feel like
Right.
you're drowning every little bit, and then they keep you nice and cold. Then they pull you out, and they do what's called sugar cookies, which you roll around in that soft sand and get sand in every crevice of your body, so that
Hmm.
when you do your runs, you're nice and chafed
Right.
everywhere. And that's where
Right.
commando style comes from, right? We don't wear
Right.
underwear for that reason, is because if you have underwear on, sand
Yeah.
gets in there, it gets trapped, and all of a sudden you've got these big open sores on areas of your
Yeah.
body you really don't want them.
Right.
Then you have the combat training tank, which is now that's more of your underwater stress stuff. They have what's called the beehive, where they, imagine 180 people put into a swimming pool that has no bottom, right? It's like 15, 20 feet down. So you're just treading
Right.
water. And then the instructors get in and they surround you and they force you all together into this beehive. And what happens is you run out of room to tread water because you are literally all stacked together. So people panic. The stress gets really high. People start to freak out. And that's where a lot of folks, that's the first time I think I saw people start to quit, was that you're being claustrophobic in the water and there's no way other than to start pushing each other down
Right.
to actually maintain
To float.
air and breathe,
Right.
right?
Right.
If you're smart, you just take deep breaths. You go down below the beehive and just hang out there. And then you find an opening. You go up, you take a quick breath, you go back down, you hang out the
Right.
bottom of the beehive.
Right.
So the smart guys, and that's definitely what I was doing. I was like, let all that mess take place above me
Right.
and then move on. Other torture is later in, which is called dive phase, the second phase. And this is where you learn scuba. They put the old Jacques Cousteau, double bottle, you know, um, with the old school regulators. And you wear those and you just go back and forth across the bottom while the instructors shark attack you. And because it's the military, there's a procedure, right? So you have to they'll come down, they'll rip your mask off, your fins, take your weight belt off, they'll tie a big knot in your hose, turn your air off, and now you have to solve all those problems in a specific order. So not only do you have to maintain your composure and stay calm, but you have to do everything in a specific order, or else it's a fail. If you bolt to the surface, it's a fail. There's a lot of varying ways that they mess with you leveraging water.
Right.
Needless to say, and in retrospect, you go, "Wow, that was a lot of fun." But yeah, during it, it's high stress. You're like freaking out every day because you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right. When I was at the academy, they make you dive off of a 10-meter dive board, which is okay, but they said, if you're ever in a C5, this big cargo thing that ditches in the ocean and you have to jump off, it's 10 meters. And it was they just were coming up with torture to make people do that.
Yeah.
So I I took a scuba diving class, and they would make you go down and take all your stuff up and then go to the top. But it was a deep pool because it was a 10-meter, board,
Mhm.
and then go back down. And man, that sucked. I could not go down with no with no flippers on. And I remember thinking to myself, God, I'm glad I'm not a SEAL. This would be pretty awful
Yeah, I think
doing
I
that
remember
stuff.
that. I did my scuba certification when I was young, when I was a kid, and I remember that you have to ditch all your stuff, then go to the surface, do a breath
Yeah.
hold, go back down, and put it all back on. Right?
Yeah, the ditch and
Yeah,
done. Yeah.
yeah.
It was a
Yeah,
long
I
time
remember
ago.
that. That's challenging too.
So when you graduate from there, are there different kind of when you're an Air Force pilot, there's fighter pilots and heavy pilots and instructors. Are there different jobs you get, or is everybody kind of universally assignable?
So yeah, you graduate buds, and then for me, I went to the Special Operations Medical School. So
Okay.
you end up going through. You basically come out a doctor in trauma medicine, but you just don't get the MD behind your name. And it's a really good program. It's run by the Army. It's at Fort Bragg, and then you do. For me, I had to do that. It's a total of a year, right? Straight. It's like trauma medicine crammed into a year, and it also is high stress. You could not relax for a second at that school either, and that was more mental, right? I mean, you're getting
Right.
tested regularly. You got a
Right.
board of doctors that are boarding you every couple of weeks,
Right.
and you come out of there really good. Then for me, so that was my specialty. You check into a team. For everybody else that's not a corpsman or a medic, then they're just checking straight into a team and going through the advanced training to become a SEAL. And so you're not really a SEAL until well, when I went through, you showed up to your team, and then your peers decided when you were ready to earn your trident, right? So it was a new guy world. There was no standard, and now there is, right? So now you go through Buzz and you go through this advanced training, and at the end of the advanced training, you get your trident. Then you go check into a SEAL team. Mine was a little more old school, where you show up to a team, you're put into a
Right.
platoon. Everybody's got a trident except for you,
Right.
and now you've got to earn it. And that's where the term, you got to earn your trident every day,
Right.
especially if you're not wearing it yet. And then once you get it, then you got to maintain it, right? So,
Right.
but everybody across the board is a SEAL, and then each guy in the platoon usually has primary and secondary jobs. You could be a comms guy, you could be an ordnance guy, you could be a breacher, you could be a sniper. But the idea is if you've got a 16 to 18 man platoon, everybody has a primary, everybody has a secondary, and there's usually two of each, right? So there's two medics, two snipers, two breachers. Um, you're always a shooter first,
Right.
and then you have your collateral duties that you leverage based on the operation.
What is a breacher? Are they banging down the door?
Right. Yeah, they're your guys that are going to blow a door or even blow holes in walls. Some of our tactics got really advanced where we wouldn't even use doors. We would just blow the corner out of a building and go in that way. So
You would make doors.
we make doors so that, yeah, because the bad guys, they're in there waiting. So they're
Right.
waiting and usually have their guns pointed at doors. So if you
Right.
create a door, then they don't expect that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
And so you did this. When did you graduate from Buds? In the,
Yeah, so I
do you
went
remember?
in '94, graduated Buds in '96, I think, February '96, something like that.
Okay.
Went to medic school, came back, and then I was at SEAL Team 3 for about half my career.
Did you wear a uniform?
Kind of. Yeah, we wear, SEALs are notorious for zero military bearing. Well, I take that back. Probably the only military bearing thing we got going is we do show up on time, or
Right.
we show up 15 minutes early, right?
Right.
But everything else, we are horrible, right? We
Right.
mix and match our camis. We don't like wearing our covers when we're supposed to. We're kind of definitely road maverick guys, or at least used to be.
Go commando.
Yeah, exactly. There was a
From
point when the uniform of the day was the old UDT shorts, right? These old canvas, these tan canvas, ugly ass shorts, and then you would wear your cami blouse. So if your cami blouse was longer than your shorts, which was more than likely, then it just looked like a bunch of dudes that had their tops on, nothing down below, with combat boots on, walking around. It's the weirdest look, but we were proud of
It's the Navy.
it. That's right. At the end of the day, it is the Navy.
Hi, folks. I have found the ultimate t-shirt. Have you ever worn a wool t-shirt? If not, thank me later. They are nature's miracle. My friends at Unbound Merino sent me these spectacular clothes that are made of 100% ultra-fine premium merino wool, and it's not the itchy kind. They are functional, minimalist in style, and most important, they're sustainable. Naturally odor resistant, antibacterial, and fast drying, you can work out in these clothes, you can go out in them, and in my case, you can even go to space in them, which I actually did. There's no need for a washing machine. I worked out in a merino wool t-shirt for a month without washing them, and it was no problem. Visit www.unboundmerino.com and enter the code down to earth, that's one word, down to earth, for a 15% discount at checkout. So you were in the 90s. So that's when you graduated, I was flying over Iraq. It was the Saddam years, right? The no-fly years. We weren't really at war with them, but there was that stuff going on. And
Right.
then 9/11 happens, and then, it's Iraq and Afghanistan for 20 years.
Yeah.
But was that your, theater of operations, or were you going other places?
Yeah. So when I checked in, each team had geographical expertise, right? So SEAL Team 3 was the Middle East, desert operations. We were the guys that would deal with anything going on in that region. And then, of course, once wars kicked in, they realized very quickly, well, you can't just put SEAL Team 3 over there and then leave them there for 20 years straight.
Right.
So what they did is they basically restructured, and then they got it to where all teams rotate in and put us into rotation so that all SEAL teams are rotating in and out of theaters of war on a regular basis. So the West Coast predominantly rotated in and out of Iraq, and then the East Coast would rotate in and out of Afghanistan. Of course, there was some mix and match going on and stuff like that, just to fill requirements or whatever needed for each theater. But yeah, so I was SEAL Team 3, and that's all we did was Middle East stuff. Pre 9/11, we were doing reconnaissance on the KA, which was the river coming out into the Persian Gulf. When all those embargoes were in place, we were doing shipboardings of non-compliant vessels, smuggling oil, weapons, whatever embargo things we had going against Saddam, during that time. And those were fun years because there's nothing like boarding a ship in the middle of the night and they have no idea where you came from. You just show up on their bridge, you put a gun to their head, and you say, "This is our boat now. You're going to take it." And so being a modern day pirate is probably one of the coolest things ever. And then we would steer those ships into international waters, turn them over to NATO, and then they would take it from there. But and then, yeah, like you said, 9/11 kicked in,
Right.
and then we were busy from then on out. And as far as I know, the teams are still just going full bore all the time.
Unfortunately, I think that's probably the case. So you talk about Iraq and Afghanistan. By the way, I want to hear how you got on the boat. But when you mention Iraq and Afghanistan, I think most Americans think Iraq and Afghanistan and Saudi and Jordan are all the same, but they're not, right?
No, not at all.
What's the difference between Iraq and Afghanistan from a guy on the ground?
There's a lot of differences, geographical stuff. I think first environmentals, right? People think the Middle East is always hot. There are some really cold nights in both countries. You get into northern Iraq, I mean, it is cold. The same as if you get into the mountains of Afghanistan, it is freezing cold. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one piece that people just assume it's just always hot over there. Sand, right? Yeah, there's sand. But it's not all desert. There are parts that are just beautiful, right? You're just so surreal. You're looking at this beautiful landscape, and you kind of forget for a moment that you're like, wow, I'm in the middle of an operation or middle of a war or whatever's going on around you, So there's some beautiful, mesmerizing spots in all those different theaters. The cultures, they've got the Islam as a foundation, but really very different. It's it really is a difference of thought processes and cultures and bloodlines and tribes that really drive their macro differences, if you will. Even when you're looking, like, they think, oh, the devout Muslim has, the big beard. But if you're in Iraq, they got clean shaven beards. In
Right.
Afghanistan, they got the big long ones.
Right.
There's a lot of differences between all of those different countries, but they still have that same common foundation of Islam.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been, have you been back there since your time in the Navy?
No, I have not. Yeah.
It was
So
weird.
it's
Yeah, you hadn't been. So I just did this one more orbit mission. We flew around the world. It was with a Qatar Airways. They provided the airplane. So I was flying over and like we flew over Iraq. In my time there, I was always flying over northern Iraq, and I was looking out and I was like, hey, I flew my F-16 here. We used to orbit there. This is our cap spot. And it kind of freaked me out. It was weird. I didn't expect that relationship or that reaction.
well,
I was like, it wasn't that big of a deal, but when I went back, it like kind of really hit me. It was something that I did not expect, going back. Um,
yeah. I always found it interesting when you would go over, and then a year and a half, whatever the deployment cycles were, you go back, how
yeah,
much it changed in that amount of time.
in the year and a half, right?
Like, because I did the initial push into Iraq, right? So we were
Oh wow,
sleeping in the dirt every night, and then
right,
the next time I went, there was bases like
yeah,
with Starbucks.
right,
And you're like, whoa! And there's actual flat screens in every room. You can sleep in a bed. It was
right,
it just amazing that how fast that machine, just the United States military, the government holistically, right? I mean, for every act of war you have going on there, there's also 10 acts of humanitarian going on that never
yeah,
gets told about. And that's the piece that, is kind of unfortunate with the media, is that, yeah, you hear about all the, you know, whether it's bombs falling from the skies or the operations that, the military is doing, but there's far more good things going on that we're doing that represent
yeah,
showing the flag and, building trust and rapport with the countries we're in.
yeah, and especially helping women in Afghanistan, which is a real disaster. But from space, you fly over that part, and it's not the most developed part of the world, right? The mountainous region between the Himalayas and the ocean, right? It's Afghanistan, all the stands,
Yeah.
and you can see Kabul at night, like as a city. It's this yellow. It's not Shanghai, or New York, but it you can see it as a city at night. And I remember thinking, that's because of America. We built
Yeah.
that city. Not to get into the politics of what's good and bad, but that was definitely something that you could see from space. The at least some amount of economic development, which is pretty cool. You've
Yeah.
seen, I'm sure you've seen. There's this poster. There's like an army guy sitting there holding his gun, and he goes, "This place sucks." And then there's a Marine going, "I love it how much this place sucks." And then there's a SEAL with a knife in his teeth, and he's like, "I wish it sucked more." And then there's a Air Force guy sitting in his chair with his remote control going, "No cable TV. This place sucks."
Yeah,
So
that's about right.
it is 100% right. And so when I'm thinking of Iraq, you're talking about like sand and cold and whatever. And we had our, nice. I worked on my golf game while I go fly over Iraq and then fly back and work on my golf game. And
Yeah.
it was like, it's not great, but it's a hotel, right? It's like the VOQ, right? Or the whatever, the quarters. It's just a normal hotel. And we go down there, and we were only down there usually for much less time than you were there for. And the Marines showed up, and they built tents in the hotel, like quad, So imagine going to your Holiday Inn Express with a bunch of tents in the parking lot. And we go like, guys, we have rooms here. Like half the hotel is empty, and they're like, "Rah, rah, 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 rah." So for the Marines, if they're in a hotel room, then they got to get per diem. They got to get their $20 or $50 a day or whatever it was. But
Yeah.
if they're in tents, they're only getting $3 a day or whatever. So the Marine
Yeah.
Corps, and they were there for 6 months, so they had to
Just to
set
save
up
a buck.
tents. They had to set up tents next to these nice rooms that we had with showers and stuff. And not
Insane.
and Yeah, when I had been a cadet, I considered joining the Marines. I really thought about maybe cross commissioning into the Marine Corps, and I came to my senses and stayed in the Air Force. So that was a
Nice. Yeah.
confirming story there.
Yeah, I think you made the right decision. I mean, the joke for us was always the Air Force bases. They figure out the golf course first, then they
Yeah,
build the base, right? So I think that's
exactly.
along with the runway. If you got the runway, you got the golf course, then everything else is
Well, you
beautiful
got to have the
after
greens. You have to have the brake. You want to
that.
manage.
Yeah,
If it's left or right brake or whatever.
yeah.
So tell me about boarding boats. That was an interesting thing, and I think you didn't only board them in the Persian Gulf, right?
No, yeah, we anytime there's a non-compliant vessel, it was one of our primary jobs for a long time before all the wars kicked off, and so usually they're smuggling something, or they're doing something nefarious, or intelligence says they're bad, or whatever it is, right? And so imagine middle of the night in any ocean, um, we're sitting there waiting, and you can't see them because they run with all lights off. So
Right.
imagine something that big, like a tanker, right,
Right.
with 1,000 Conex boxes on it, right, and this thing is blacked out and cruising at 20 knots, and the only way you see it is because you got radar in your boats.
Right.
Um, so that was usually a big indicator that they must be doing something bad,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Um, and then the other indicator is, especially in the Gulf, is they would hug that international water line,
Mm.
right? Every country owns out to 12 nautical miles of the
Right.
ocean that borders their country, right?
Right.
So a lot of these guys knew our rules of engagement is that we're not allowed to go in Iranian waters. So
Right.
they would hug that 12 nautical mile line
Right.
mark. And if they felt any trouble coming, they would steer right into it,
Turn
knowing that,
left.
yeah, turn left. And then knowing that we would have to get off the boat, which is a lot harder than getting on the boat.
Right.
um, and so it became a really fun game of cat and mouse with some of these captains who had experience, and they knew, or they had heard, um, what we were doing. And so we had to, always kind of clean up our tactics and get better and better and better, as they got better at being bad. And so, but the common way to do it without detection is, you're really just pulling up next to this huge ship in the middle
You're
of
in a
the night.
Zodiac or what?
Jet boats. We've got these boats, and we can get basically skin to skin, which is very is dangerous in itself, because if you've ever
Yeah.
seen the swells coming
Oh
down the
yeah.
side
Yeah.
of a ship, it's differences of, you're talking 20 feet, right?
Right.
One minute you're down low, the next
Right.
minute you're up. I remember one night there was a guy on one of the decks, and you couldn't see anything until you're like right up next to this ship, right? And as we came up on a swell, it puts us up high, and we were literally face to face with somebody smoking a cigarette on the deck, and all you saw was the amber burn of him inhaling on that cigarette, right? And we're like, I wonder if he saw us. And then we went back down, right? With those swells, he
Oh
didn't
my
see
God.
anything, right? He can't see, and we were lucky to see him. But
Right.
anyway, and then you have these fancy hooks and ladders and stuff that allow you to basically scale the side of this moving ship. And so once you're up on top, you wait for all the guys, you post security in all the right places, and then it's time to move. And so you go to the bridge and you go to aft steering, and you take the boat. And then once you've got it, you make sure you steer clear of the Iranians, and then you turn it over. But it's probably, I mean, that and gas oil platform takedowns is like about as frogman as it gets, right? And that to me was, um, every single time we did non-compliant boarding, I was like, this just made my career. I could care less. Every time we did those, at the end, I was always like, okay, I can go the rest of my career and not do anything real world and still leave the Navy happy. Like
Right.
it fulfilled all my fantasies, because you're scaling the side of this huge
A tanker.
ship. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're doing it with your ninja hood on and body
Right.
armor, and an MP5. And when there's no better feeling than go to that bridge and open the door and putting a gun to that captain's head and him just like literally pissing his pants, like, where did you come from? Who are you? It's ninja stuff. It's everything we've always
That's
wanted.
awesome.
If you were a
Right.
kid that wanted to be a ninja, that's the job for you.
That's awesome. So
Yeah.
how did you tell them? Like, did you guys speak Arabic or these Greek captains or French captain,
Most of your so
or do you
the
need to tell
standard,
them?
right? The standard in international the international language is English, and
Right.
even with these captains, they have to speak it.
Right.
So language usually wasn't an issue because how we were dressed and our weapons spoke volumes. So we didn't really have to say much. They knew what to do.
It's pretty obvious. I think they probably knew what you were there to have them do. So
Oh
you
yeah.
had to learn how to drive the boat, or you just told them to drive the boat and they did the boat driving for you.
It kind of depend, but yeah, we would if we felt like we needed to take control of it. It was pretty for most of the boats that we boarded. It was pretty straightforward. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So people always ask me like what was the hardest part about being an astronaut? And for me, I always say learning to speak Russian because that's I spoke French before. French is easy, Spanish is easy, Russian is not easy. So for you being a SEAL, I think one of the things I liked about being an astronaut is I got to do lots of different stuff, right?
Hmm.
I mean, I was the crew medical officer in space. You were a lot higher trained than I was, but you were a doctor, so you got to do a lot of different stuff as a SEAL. So my question is like, what was hard? Did you ever struggle with anything, or what was the hard aspects of that for you?
Oh man, there's a bunch of stuff that's hard. Um, you know, just trying to maintain, that readiness at the highest level. It comes with a lot of hard work. You do workups, and when you're not deployed, you are constantly training, and that
Hmm.
training is all over the United States. Sometimes you're going even further to make sure that you're getting the very best in order to be the professional. Basically, you're a professional warrior. So you're you're constantly put under the gun. Usually, it's ourselves. We have a really high internal competitive spirit. You're always, most of us come from broken homes, so we're always trying to prove to ourselves that yeah, we actually are okay. Yeah, we are good. We're good. I swear, I'm good. I'm good. And it just keeps
Right.
driving that,
Right.
you know, um, whatever it is, in order to keep proving to yourself that you're good to go. And then, of course, you have your peers that you never want to let down. It becomes
Right.
it's probably one of the highest level of camaraderie and loyalty and trust that you have with those guys. um, and it's hard to maintain that. It takes a lot of hard work, but specifically, I mean, man, in buds you go through hell week, right? We all heard about it. You're
Yeah.
freezing cold, no sleep for a week straight, and only the strong survive, literally. So um, but that is to give you the foundation, because once you get into the teams and you start operating, you run into time periods and events that are far harder than Hell Week. But at least that's the common thread between all of you, is that you've all
Right.
been there, you all did it, you all made it out of that. So you know that whatever you're going to face or whatever the hell is going on around you in that moment in time, you can, in that split second, to the left and to the right or in front of you or behind you, those are the guys that are just as capable, and everything's going to be fine. And plus, misery loves company, right? So that's even better.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I can't name one thing because 20 years of those moments. Whether it's keeping up with your peers as you get older and these new guys keep on coming in,
Right.
um, or it's when guys fall. You have to go knock on the door and tell a mom and a wife that hey, he's not around any longer. So those are that's really the stuff that probably sticks with you more than anything else.
Yeah. No kidding. That was
Yeah,
part of my job as a fighter pilot and astronaut, and it sucks.
yeah,
Um, I got a lot of friends who are widows now, unfortunately. Um,
yeah.
so you do this 20 years. You decide to get out. And I think this is where you and I have a lot of parallels, to where we did one thing in the military and then we ended up doing something very different when we got out. And writing uh, was part of both of our stories. We've both written a few books. And you gave me a suggestion. I don't know if you remember this, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, whenever we first met, you told me to read Stephen King's On Writing,
Yeah.
the memoir. That was like the best advice anybody's ever given me. It is such a great book. I mean, it's
Yeah,
such a great book.
it is,
Um,
man. That thing teaches you a lot, but it's
yeah.
intertwined into some hilarious stories. I mean, who would have thought
Yeah, like
Stephen
his
King was that
biography.
funny?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was really funny. I'm not a Stephen King guy really, but that book is great. That is a great book. So if anybody out
agreed.
there wants to learn how to write or improve their writing skills, and I always tell people, and I think it's true, in high school, you have the most likely to succeed, the best looking, whatever. I think I was the most likely to not ever write a book because I sucked at English. I got C's. I tortured my English teachers, those poor ladies. Were you a English kid as a kid, or were you math and science kid, or?
I was definitely science. I don't know about math, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed. I don't know that I was good at it, but I did enjoy. Like, I felt like essays and writing papers and all that. I felt like that was like, okay, this will be an easy grade,
Oh, really?
right? Yeah,
Okay.
I
That opposite of
definitely,
me.
yeah. I don't know that I was good, but I just knew
Yeah.
that. All right, this is okay. There's an intro, there's a body, and there's a conclusion. Okay, I can do this. This is
Right.
easier than taking a multiple choice test.
Man, I was the opposite.
Yeah.
So you get out and you write your book, which I've got on my bookshelf. It's a really great book. If you're looking for a Father's Day gift or whatever, get 100 Deadly Skills. It's a really cool book. It's basically how to make a Molotov cocktail and how to tell if somebody's tailing you, and how to if they tie your hands behind the chair, how do you get it? It's stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
It's a
100
fun
Deadly,
book.
without a doubt. I feel like, these days it's not good enough to just be informative. It has to be entertaining too. So, 100 Deadly Skills really is a comprehensive MacGyver skill book, right? It's and how
Yeah.
to escape. The first book is all about escaping those really crazy situations. The second one is the survival edition, and that's everything from active shooter to misadventure out in the middle of nowhere and how to kind of save your own life. And then the third book that just came out is Combat Edition, and that's the one that gives you really skills to face violence. And but all three of them really, the goal at the end of the day is to make people a little more self-reliant, self-sufficient, and self-rescue oriented. Right? I think these days people rely way too much on others, or 911 to solve their
Mhm.
problems. And the reality is you just got to know how to solve your own problems. And to be clear, it's skills I hope no one ever has to use, but
Right.
it's better to know them than not.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that the idea that people need to, take care of themselves is true, and it's not always the philosophy of the day, but it's very true. So with the combat edition, though, we were talking. We ended up not doing it, but we had we had discussed the Space Force edition, or talking about
Yeah.
having space combat, um, which would have been probably an interesting chapter or two in your book.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I was trying to dig all the alien stories out of you, but you didn't have any, or at least you're not talking about
We'll have to turn the Zoom off, and we can talk about that later.
it. Yeah.
So there you go. How to board a spaceship. You can't just throw the unless you can hold your breath for a while. That how to board a spaceship would be a great chapter.
Yeah. I mean, how would you do it? I mean, first you have to have the suits, right?
So either you'd have to have a docking ring to where your spaceship could actually attach to the other guy, or you'd have to have a spacesuit, and then you'd have to be able to. The hatches that we have manual ways to open them, but if you open a hatch without having the pressure equalized, it's bad. Like if you went down to a submarine and just opened the hatch, that would be bad, right? Unless you had another vehicle docked to it that you
To
could,
equalize.
So when you open the hatch in space, it's the opposite. All the air would come shooting out. So you could board that way once, but you'd have to keep your spacesuit on once you got inside. Um, so it would be actually impossible to board the ISS, and if they didn't want you to board it without killing everybody inside.
Oh, do you guys
But
ever think about that? Was any of that put
no,
into the system? No.
no. I mean,
Okay.
there's no, that was never part of the training. So we
Yeah.
would be like that surprise captain, like, where did you come from?
Yeah. Right.
Because that's not an expected thing. I
Right.
had never thought of it until just now.
Yeah. I mean, it's called the International Space Station, but you'd have to assume that. Well, you never know. We got some crazy enemies out there.
The biggest threat that we have is space debris. Our Chinese friends back in 2007 did a military anti-satellite weapon test that exploded this satellite, and the debris is still up there because it'll last for decades or centuries because there's just very little drag. A couple hundred miles up, there's hardly any atmosphere, and so it just takes forever for debris to get slowed down by the atmospheric drag and eventually come back down to burn up. Um, and so having to maneuver from that space debris is our biggest threat. And the really big things you see and you can maneuver. The really super small things you don't see and they hit you, but it's not that big of a deal. Like when I did spacewalks, there was a million little divots and craters from flecks of paint from a rocket or dust or some small things at the station, and they'd make little sharp metal divots, which is bad because if it cuts your if it cuts your spacesuit, that's not good.
Hmm.
But it's kind of the mid-sized stuff in my mind that was always the most dangerous. It's too small to see, but it's big enough to do some damage. Like a golf
Yeah.
ball. A golf ball going 8 kilometers a second is gonna do some damage when it hits you. So,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
space debris is probably our biggest threat.
I bet. I was reading somewhere like there's 6,000 satellites up there now, or something crazy,
Well, these
in junk.
constellations that junk, there's tens of thousands. The Air Force tracks, or now Space Force tracks, tens of thousands of pieces in just an Earth orbit. But these super constellations that Elon's putting up, Airbus is putting up, Starlink and others, they're going to have 10,000 satellites each, and they're not all going to operate perfectly. And some of them are going to just die and be in orbit. And so if they start hitting each other, there's this thing called a Kessler effect where, one satellite hits, it makes a cloud of debris. That debris hits another satellite that makes a bigger cloud. The movie Gravity was based on this, idea.
Ah,
And it's a real thing. And there's basically no regulation. There's no like space FAA to control it. The Commerce Department, the FCC, kind of these random agencies have some control, but I think it's a real problem. So in my mind, that's one of our biggest threats in space.
so we should invest in duct tape, is what you're saying, because that's really
And
right.
Velcro, and Velcro.
Yeah. More duct
Um,
tape.
yeah, duct tape is amazing. By the way,
Right. I mean, it's how you plug holes, right?
it's how you do everything. I mean, I can't tell you how much duct tape. You keep duct tape and you rip it off and you bend the end up and you just stick it to the wall, and then so that all around the station there's these like kind of wobbling rolls of duct tape that have a little bit of tape taped to the wall, and then the whole thing is just floating there because you
Yeah.
need it all the time for everything.
Yeah. I got to make
Um,
note of that. I'm going to invest in duct tape,
that
more
could be
duct tape.
good seal equipment too. It's useful.
Oh, we have it for everything. In the medical
Yeah,
world, you're using it to
yeah,
stop bleeding, and in the teams, you're using it. You're using it for everything. Literally, it
right,
doesn't matter what kind of operation. There's always going to be duct tape somewhere on you,
right.
or on something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
There's a similarity.
exactly.
Um, so tell me about a secret operation that you're not allowed to tell me about.
Oh, let me see here. Hmm.
We won't.
Which
We'll have our producer. It'll be okay. He
You'll
he
beep
won't
it, right?
he won't send it to the Navy.
um, yeah, super secret stuff. Actually, there's a buddy of mine who's getting out that actually he'd be an interesting guest.
Yeah, send him my way.
He basically ran the entire CIA disguise department for 40 years, and
Wow.
he's got now that guy. And I had the opportunity to work with him the last part of my career on a bunch of different projects. But talk about, you know, some pretty cool capability, you know, that they've put together, and kind of the predecessor to him and the people who've really put disguises in movies and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff, was Jonah Mendez and Tony Mendez.
Hmm.
And there's some books that they've got out, Master of Disguise, and and then of course a Ben Affleck movie that's based on one of Tony's operations. Um, what was the name of that movie? God, just
Not
lost it.
Argo.
Argo. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's Tony. Um,
Hmm.
Tony passed away probably, has it been a year or two now?
Hmm.
John is still up and running. She does a lot of speaking on, you know, blending in, and of course it's all based on disguise stuff. Um, but they've got some really, I mean, imagine being able to turn a corner, change your entire identity in less than 4 seconds, right? Like,
Wow.
yeah, I mean,
Like
that's the kind of
Superman.
stuff, you know, they've developed some pretty cool stuff where you can move in and out of different environments, and leveraging some of that technology, become a different person in a very short period of time. and
Wow.
uh
How do
and
you do that? You
anyway,
put the mustache on or something, or
there's a lot of pre-planning. You know, this is not
right,
something you do because you, you're not going to do it. It's not an impromptu thing.
right,
You have to plan and prep,
right,
and figure out how you're going to. It's a system that you're going to have to put in place, right? And you got
right,
to, and not to mention there's rehearsals and stuff that go along with it. But
right.
they have some pretty sexy capability. But Bob is, yeah, he'll be up for podcasts and all that kind of stuff here pretty soon. And I was just literally talking to him yesterday about it. And so, yeah, if you
That'll
want
be
some of the
awesome.
really sexy stuff, I would say
Yeah.
get him on because,
Well,
yeah, and
well,
he's funny too. I mean, those
right.
guys get this, like when they go to do any of their research to stay on top of the latest greatest stuff in latex and silicone, they're going to like Vegas to adult toy conferences, you know, or they'll go to the cosmetic industries conferences, or they go
Right,
to, you know, different, you know, prosthetic conferences. I mean, you
right.
name it, they get to go to all these things, and it involves some pretty weird, freaky stuff. So he's got some great stories that relate to that. But yeah,
I love it.
there you go,
Well,
there you go.
you know,
He'll tell
when
you
you
all the
watch,
secrets.
yeah, I want to have him on. He sounds awesome. When you watch the Bourne movies, you got the safe deposit box with some passports, and you can sneak into Bulgaria and wherever with you can't do that anymore because of biometrics. It's really
Yes,
added a layer of complexity to the spy tradecraft, right?
without a doubt.
Unless you can hack a computer. When you go to China, I went to China 5 times 3 years ago. It's just even now. I've been to a couple airports in the States where you don't even need your boarding pass. You just show up and they know who you are.
Yeah, yeah, it's getting. I mean, I kind of kid about the pandemic and wearing masks. Like, it's not such a bad deal because facial
Right,
recognition isn't working that well.
right,
So for your own personal security, if you're worried about Big Brother or foreign intel services or any of that kind of stuff, you know, wearing a mask is actually, you know, now because of this, you should,
right,
if you've got worries about that kind of stuff, just keep wearing the mask forever from here on out
right.
because no one's going to, you know, say anything to you anymore about it. Um, but as it relates to any of like how Hollywood kind of shows things getting done, um, yeah, I mean, there's some accuracies there, but once again, it's never that easy. You know, when you're talking about identities, right? That's not something you just go and stuff in some safety deposit box somewhere in the world,
Right.
right? The government, you know, certainly um, keeps track of that kind of stuff, and it's not as easy to just you know, have it in a secret little drawer in your house. Just doesn't.
Yeah.
None of that kind of stuff works like that. That's for sure.
It used to, but not anymore.
Yeah, maybe one day. Biometrics definitely is an issue for those guys because obviously it really boils down not so much to the cameras. because now they've got, analytics at the lens, was a huge leap. Um, but really what it boils down to is storage, right? So server, you have to have a server farm. The server farm has to be loaded with your face in order to compare your face, right?
Hmm.
So, unless if you were never a criminal, then the odds are that you run in facial recognition. It has nothing to run against unless there's something there, right? That's the only thing. So really, what most facial recognition systems are doing is just collecting, right? There's most people traveling are good people, so there's nothing to compare it to. But over time, as you collect
That
and collect and collect,
yes, right,
now you can, start to build a lot of stuff. But
yeah.
it takes server farms. And what I found interesting at the beginning was that a lot of these airports had all this high tech cameras and analytics at the lens, but they didn't have the server farm part. They didn't think
Hmm.
about that part. So a lot of it was up and running, but it wasn't actually doing anything. You know what I mean?
Right.
They
Unless you're on
weren't.
the FBI's most wanted, they're not going to
Yeah,
be able to pick you
exactly.
out. But I think those days are that window is rapidly narrowing, Clint.
Right.
The
Yeah. I
database
mean,
is being built, and you hear about people, they're getting caught for crimes, which is a good thing, from these DNA databases. People
hmm
23andMe, and they're great, and you learn about who your ancestors were, and it's really
yeah.
great. And then Uncle Bob gets arrested by the FBI for something because they're
I think that's
comparing
genius.
notes.
Yeah.
And it's always good when we're using it against bad guys, but what if they use it against good guys? That's the concern I have.
No
And
doubt, no doubt.
the
If you fast forward from when all that technology came on the scene, now the databases are more real time in the fact that your picture at the airport is immediately run against social media, right?
yeah.
And if you don't have social media, well, that's weird. That's going to be a red flag. And then if that picture runs against social media and there's any discrepancies, then you're probably going to get pulled into secondary, right? Like, so there's this, of you. And obviously, a lot of people could explain it away. They could say, well, I don't use my real name for social media. That's
Right.
crazy. Who would do that? But yeah, anyway, there's a lot of ways to get caught now.
It's a brave new world, and I'm very concerned about some of those directions. The Big Brother thing is real,
Yeah.
and it's very real. So anyway, so maybe that's going to be our next fiction novel, the next Jack Ryan series you and I could write.
Yeah. Well, we'd have to catch up to Jack Carr. I mean, that guy's crushing it with his. He's in like the next Tom Clancy, putting these great books together about.
Yeah,
Jack Reese is the character, and it's good stuff. You got to check it out.
I will do that. I have not seen it. So the other thing you've done, you've gotten out, you've written these books, and you have a company, crisis management. So I have some questions about that. Can you tell us about, is that Escape the Wolf?
Yeah. So yeah, Escape the Wolf was really my retirement plan and job, and been doing it since before I got out. I let it overlap a little bit, terminal leave and all that kind of stuff. So I could transition straight into it and not have to do, your typical contract work. But what we're doing is building policy, training workforces, and supplying them with tools they need to increase survivability across the board as it relates to the big five. So safe travel abroad, medical events, natural disaster, cyber threat awareness stuff, and of course, man-made. Um, Man-made being the most popular is active shooter, man-made events.
Hmm.
So we have policies that cover all of that, and then we have video-based training that can be loaded onto a learning management system at any organization, and then the workforce can watch a video once a week. We've built the system so that people don't have to stop working to do a 2-hour seminar, to click through a bunch of PowerPoint slides. I mean, that's a majority of what was out there. And then we came along and said, how can we educate a workforce of any size without them actually stopping work? And
Right.
so we've come up with a syllabus and video-based program that does just that. And then, of course, we got tools, right? So you got little cards they can put on their access control, if they wear on their lanyards, or they can
Hmm.
put it in a wallet. It's got reminders. We've got manuals and handouts and everything you need. So when the power goes out, you still have some reference material, because people forget that when it comes to crisis, you still got to, it's great that you got the PDF, but you need a hard copy as well still,
Right.
just in case. And
Right.
so we supply really an entire holistic program to a company. Um, and it keeps them, it's three things it covers, right? We build the policy based on their general liability and insurance, right? We make sure that it complements insurance. We make sure that it holds up in court. And then, of course, the big one, it protects the people. And so that's it. And it's a plug and play system that any company can leverage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so. Every company needs that. You literally are making a product that every company that has employees needs. So I was in Boulder a couple weeks ago. The skiing in Colorado this year has been unbelievable. The amount of snow they've had has been
Yeah.
just amazing. And I was going out for a late lunch, and as I'm parking, I see this cop running down the street. He jumps in his car, and 15 minutes later, the alerts start going off on the phone, and it was during the shooter. Right.
Mm.
And it just happens constantly in America, unlike anywhere else in the world, as we all know. And it's
Yeah.
not going to stop. The political system is not ever going to allow anything to happen about it. So we're going to continue to have mass shootings. So what do you do if you're in that grocery store looking for some Oreo cookies, and what do you do?
Yeah, there's a when it comes to active shooters, and you make a great point, especially this year. We've already had 100+ mass shootings in the United States, right? And
It's a
rolling
bloodbath.
we're rolling into what, April? So this and it makes sense. I mean, unfortunately, the isolation of the pandemic has exacerbated substance abuse, mental health, relationship issues, financial issues. These are all triggers for mass shootings before the pandemic. So you have to assume as we come out of it, it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And so
Yeah.
it's more important than ever to know like what to do.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of acronyms and a lot of stuff out there, but I like simple. I think simple works best under stress. It's easier to recall it. It's easier to retain it. And that's run, hide, fight, right? But there are some details to each one of those three options because they're in no particular order, because really the situation decides if you can run or not, or if you should hide, or if you should fight, right? So it's just being able to remember that, okay, if there's any kind of distance between you and the shooter, you should increase that distance, right? Increasing distance increases survivability. And that's your number one goal. Number two is running. Um, a lot of times the mammalian reflex kicks in under stress. That is our connection to mammals, to animals. So if you see a herd of people go running by, it's going to be a natural tendency for you to join in and run with them. But what you have to do at the individual levels, ensure that they're not running towards the shooter,
Right.
right? Because things get very confusing.
Right.
Gunfire indoors is omnidirectional, right?
Right.
You hear a gunshot, you'll think it's coming from the left, but really it's
Right.
coming from the right.
Right.
And that's how a lot of times you'll hear about it, people running towards a shooter. It's just because they think
Right.
they're running away from the gunfire.
Right.
So, put yourself in check in those situations. And when you run, ideally it's good to run after you've identified the bad guy, right? If you can see him, now you watch his actions and you take advantage. When he turns his back or he looks left, you're going to run right.
Right.
So there's a little bit of, you've got to have your awareness, your eyes, your ears, everything turned on, and then make really sound tactical decisions in a very short period of time. And that's where people just, sometimes fail. It's easy in a clinical setting where you have plenty of time and zero stress to make good decisions. But in these situations, you have zero time and a lot of stress. So that's where tactical decision making comes in, and where you can sensitize your tactical decision making is by constantly running scenarios through your head, right? You have to sensitize yourself. Like if you're at the grocery store, okay, what would I do right now? Where can I run to right now? What can I hide behind right now that stops bullets, right? Or concealment, right? There's a difference between concealment and cover. Cover stops
Protection,
bullets.
right, right,
Concealment hides you from them, right? From the bad guy. So getting out of sight is great, but getting out of sight behind something that stops bullets is better. And that's the
right.
choice you should always strive for. Which means, once again, uh, right now, when you're in your little world of going to the grocery store, or you're at home, or you're at work, or wherever you're at, you take a couple of seconds and you go, okay, what's my route to get out of here? And okay, what are some things near me that stop bullets? And you'd be surprised. There's a lot. There's cinder block walls, and there's granite countertops, and there's desks that you can flip over, and there's metal and steel objects everywhere. You just got to identify them and know where they're at.
Right.
And then of course, so with a hide, you want to make sure you're not running towards dead ends, right? That's bathrooms and closets, right? If there's no other way out, or there's no way to barricade the door, that's a dead end. And that's where the term comes from. So
Right.
you don't want to go there.
Right.
You want to go identify those rooms. There's furniture, there's a refrigerator, there's something you can barricade that door. Or it's a room that you can barricade the door and it has a window, so you have another way out, right? That's ideal.
Right.
But none of it's perfect.
Right.
But you do want to identify those things. And then of course, fight, right? Fighting is something that is a last resort. If you're a guy that's confident in his ways, then sure, you should strive to try and save as many lives as possible. But if you're just the average person, then the fight should be a last resort.
Right.
If you're a gun-toting guy like me, well, then you're probably going to go and run towards gunfire just because that's fun. And guys like me are crazy like that. But if you're not, then the majority of the public is going to have to, they find themselves, let's say, in a dead-end situation. You hear gunshots getting closer and closer to your location. Okay, now you got to grab some things around you. Everything is a weapon, and you want to use that, with extreme violence.
Talk about that, because that's a hard. Most people don't fight.
No,
I mean, I haven't been in a fight since college. I boxed in college, and since then, it's the last time I hit somebody.
Yeah, no, that's, if you're not doing it all the time, it can be tough. But what I tell people is, yeah, you can think to yourself, man, I'm not going to be able to do that.
Right.
But imagine that. Put yourself in a situation that gets your adrenaline going or gets you fired up. Like, imagine someone that walks up and then just punches your kid in the face while you're standing there. What is that going to do to you, right? If you've got a little one and someone takes advantage of your child, your dad mode, mom mode, that primal side will come out when somebody hurts someone around you. So that is what's going to drive that ability to be violent, and especially those moments when the gunfire is coming your way. There's the, you always hear about, the fight or flight type stuff. But in those moments, you're gonna have to fight. There's no other option. And when you do, ideally, you team up with some people, right? And it's a real quick plan. It's like, okay, I'm going for the weapon. You guys are going for the body, right? And the goal is to separate the weapon from the body, but the weapon becomes the primary target. You get control of that weapon, whether it's grab it like a pull-up bar, grab it like a chin-up, or bear hug it. Whatever you need to do, you're going to grab that weapon. You're going to get positive control, and then you're going to let gravity do the rest. You're just going to simply body weight drop to the ground, just dead weight. I don't care who's holding that gun. They're not going to be able to maintain it. And if they have a sling around them, let's say the weapon has a sling, the sling is around the bad guy, well, guess who's going down with that weapon, right? So positive control, and then gravity takes over. and then everybody else jumps on the bad guy, right? And the reason I keep it that simple is because your fine motor skills when adrenaline's flowing is they're not going to be functioning very well, right?
Right.
But your big gross motor skills will. You'll be able those big grabs, big tackles, all that kind of
Right.
stuff is still going to work, and it's going to be powerful. It's going to be the most powerful tackle you've ever thrown in your life. You're probably,
Right.
in the reality is the average person when the adrenaline gets going and they go to tackle, they aim for the hips, right? You want to
Right.
aim for the pelvis. The spine is connected to the pelvis. It's a big target. If you have control of the pelvis, you have control of the body, right? Basic MMA stuff. And so, but the odds are with adrenaline and a tackle from the average person, you're both probably going through the sheetrock wall that's
Right.
nearby. I
Right.
mean, because we all know when the adrenaline goes, the superhero strength comes out,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's real. So run, hide, fight. Those are the basics. You can get really detailed with each of those options. But as long as you just remember that those are your options, then you're going to increase the odds of survivability during these violent attacks.
Man, it's such a you talk about mental health, to even have to think about that stuff is not, when you go to the grocery store, you don't want to have to plan your escape route. But I find myself doing that when I go to restaurants or whatever. I have those thoughts are running through my brain.
Yeah,
But I think it's the ability to fight, and in all these situations, very few people ever do that. And I think if you can get your brain prepared to fight somebody, I think that could cut down on the number of deaths that you have sometimes. Remember that nightclub in Florida a couple years ago that was
oh
at the
yeah,
Pulse nightclub? Yeah. So that same week there was an incident in Israel, and I remember at that nightclub, like everybody just kind of sat there while he was reloading. So if you hear, if you hear the reloading happening, that's a good time to attack, right?
good time to attack or increase distance. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
that's the time to go.
that same week, there was this restaurant in Israel, and these two guys came in. They were dressed like rabbis, but they took their thing off and they had guns. And I mean, I'm laughing. I shouldn't laugh, but like the restaurant just mobbed them immediately, and I don't even think they killed anybody. Or it was a very different situation where I think the general population in Israel was ready for that, and everybody sprung into action immediately, and
Yeah,
there was no bloodshed. Whereas in America, everybody just kind of hid while he reloaded, and a lot of more people died. So if people can act like the ways you just said, it actually could increase safety.
it does. It also puts future active shooters in check. They'll think about like imagine if we had 10 active shooters that were taken down by civilian, the innocent citizens that
Right,
were surrounding them before a shot was
right,
even fired.
right,
Let's say we heard that over and over and over again. Eventually, someone who's thinking about going and doing that is probably going to go, you know what, I'm probably not going to get anywhere.
right.
It's probably not going to work. They'll have to figure out some other way of creating damage.
Yeah,
And Israel, that's an interesting. I like that because the difference too with Israel is everybody probably sitting there had to
right,
serve their country
right.
at least 2 years, right? I mean, it's mandatory.
Everybody
Um,
had been in the military, so that's probably they were
yeah,
ready for it. Yeah,
and that's a country that's been at war its entire existence. So
right.
yeah, that's a bunch of that'd be crazy to be an active shooter in any place in Israel.
Uh, right.
Yeah,
That's not a safe job.
not for the active shooter.
uh, so we're sitting here, the pandemic. I'm going to get my second shot as soon as we hang up from the podcast. So
Nice.
I'm excited about it. That's going to be awesome to be vaccinated. I'm dreading it because my friends it's making some people sick, but it doesn't. Getting vaccinated is going to make it worth it for me for sure. Um, but a lot of people have been displaced. I like to ask this question of my guests: what advice do you have for people who've been displaced? So like you were doing speaking. Speaking was my main source of income, and it went from 100 to zero overnight a year ago. So you have to be adaptive, right? You have to be able to adapt. So I
Yeah.
don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that for people who have been affected by the pandemic, which is basically everybody listening?
Yeah. I mean, I think um, you have to have an ability to pivot, right? Like what you just said. being able to pivot, whether there's a pandemic or not, with whatever it is you're doing in life, is always kind of good to think about, right? It's almost like, you're running scenarios through your head. We talked about it, doing it for active shooters. You kind of also have to do it, whether you're an employee or you're a business owner.
Hmm.
Constantly thinking, how do I evolve, or you know change what I'm doing based on my clients' behaviors, or the business behaviors, or the economy. There's so many other things that can derail you. And so I think it's important that you're always looking for those outs, if you will, right? You're looking for those exit strategies, or you're looking for that new way of doing whatever it is you're doing. One, it keeps you current. It keeps you relevant, right? That's
Right.
everybody's job these days, is how do I stay relevant?
Right.
And so you have to be evolving and thinking and adapting on a regular basis in order to get there. So embracing technology, right? I mean, there's plenty of people
Hmm.
that had no idea what Zoom was. Now the whole world knows what Zoom is.
We are on Zoom right now.
Right. And, or, microphones and headsets, and people actually understand the value in quality audio.
Hmm. Right.
Because if
Exactly.
you're like me and you're watching anything on YouTube or social media, and if it could be cinematography beautiful, but as soon as the audio kicks in and it's crap, swipe,
Right.
I'm done, right? You're not even
Right.
going to watch it. So
Right.
I think a lot of things have evolved out of this, that is that are the reason is because people pivoted. People figured out, all right, I got to do something different. They've taken their keynotes to right here, online. A lot of my in-person stuff became, just like this now. And then I think we've seen a lot of companies realize, well, wait a minute, we don't need that big elaborate headquarters building anymore. We'll just
Right.
keep people at home forever. So you're seeing a lot of places shutting down, and especially headquarters, and just letting people go remote for the long haul.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say, it's a little late in the game if you're just now realizing you need to pivot or evolve. But you should also be thinking, all right, what's the next thing coming, right? I mean,
Yeah.
who would have predicted um, a pandemic, right? It's just crazy.
Right.
And what's funny is, anytime I would be pre-pandemic, I had different security managers or CEOs that I would go and present. Hey, Escape the Wolf. Guess what we do? We do pandemic policies and this and that. Um, and we did some business doing pandemic prep, and those companies surely benefited. But uh, the ones that there was times I was laughed out of the room, like, oh, that's equivalent to an alien invasion. There's not going to be
Right.
a pandemic. And yeah, it's kind of funny. So you never, yeah, you never
That's
know.
funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but you got to be able to pivot because, life is never the one thing that's constant is change. And no matter what your career, no matter what your age, you have to be able to, well, you don't have to, but if you're able to pivot
Yeah.
and be flexible, you're going to be successful. If you're not, you won't. Right. So
Yeah. You'll get stuck.
you get stuck in a rut. Yeah. Um, all right, man. Well, I think I'm going to go get my shot, go get in line and get the Moderna #2. Have you had
Yeah.
yours yet? Are you?
No, I don't think, when does it kick in for everybody? I think everybody can start taking it when.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They're saying like in the next 2 weeks. I just heard the president was saying, in April they're gonna. I'm not sure when this podcast probably won't be dropped until May. So by the time this thing drops,
Yeah.
there's probably going to be the alien invasion, and who knows what's going to happen in the next month.
Yeah. Well, I'm running to your house when aliens come, since you have all those weapons sitting in your basement.
Yeah, exactly.
All
Uh, all right,
right.
Clint. Well, hey, thanks for coming on, man. This is awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for
We'll have to
having
talk.
me.
We'll have to tell the secret stories afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have to run it through the Pentagon first, and then we can talk about it. But yeah, I appreciate your time, and thanks for having me. And good luck with continued podcasts. And I'll probably be having you on mine here shortly. So look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you again.
That'll be fun. Good luck with your 100 skills. The book #3 out, and
Yeah.
the new podcast is. Uh, can you
Can you
survive this podcast?
can you survive this podcast, where the
All
interview
right.
is just as dangerous as the scenario we put our guests through?
You sound like wow. You sound like Dan Carlin. Have you ever listened to Hardcore History?
No, I'll have to check it
Oh my
out.
God, you need to listen to it. It's the most
Okay.
amazing. I'm listening to the Pacific War, World War II. The guy's the best storyteller of all time.
Oh wow.
You
Yeah,
just
definitely check
sounded
it
exactly like Dan Carlin. So
out.
that's impressive.
That's creepy.
It is. It's very creepy.
All
All right.
right.
We'll talk to you later, man.
Thanks,
See you,
Terry.
Clint.
Take it easy, man. Thank you.
See ya.
Bye
Bye.
bye.